perfect. So let me know if I get a little too quiet for you. So sometimes I can kind of drone off a little bit. So thank you all again for coming to this informational meeting here. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to make sure is very clear is that right now we are not approving any new traffic calming projects. This isn't this conceptual plan that we've done. It's not for sure going to happen. We are currently reviewing our speed management procedures, and what that's going to do is that's going to help us determine how we go about prioritizing projects, what kind of traffic calming options are we going to be eligible for, that kind of thing. Again, this is mostly a community driven effort. We've talked with Catherine and several of you actually over the years about traffic calming in Eldora, getting people to slow down. We're not, right now, as I said, we're not guaranteeing any project at the moment, and we've just done this kind of at the request of these community members, so that we have kind of a plan, we have an idea of what maybe people want to see, but it's not yet going to be for sure. We want to definitely make sure that we have an approval process going forward, and of course that's what's going to be happening here. Hopefully in the near future we'll have that plan set up, and once that's ready, then it's up to those members who are interested to come back and talk to us and get it actually finalized and voted on. So if you're wondering, I'm sure a lot of you longtime residents know for sure, we have been doing things on and off. Lisa, for as far as I've been with the county, this is kind of what I know of as far as any previous traffic calming that we've done. There was the center line delineators there on the right, with basically just those reflector posts that we installed in the middle of the road. That was a seasonal thing, I believe. And then here more recently in 2018, right after the chip seal, we left our 25-mile-an-hour signs in the middle of the road. And then we also continued that again this year. At this point, we will not be continuing that unless you all kind of vote to approve traffic calming here in the future. And so again, that's going to be one of the things we got to work out in the future, is how we're going to work on this, get that approval process going. And then, so the bigger issue here obviously is all the recreational traffic going to 4th of July, Hesse, trailheads. A little bit of debrief from what happened this year. 2019, we had a record year for shuttle ridership on the Hesse shuttle. In fact, it was so good that with the access point being the park and ride there in Helena, we had so many users actually taking away parking from businesses and residents kind of who would use that parking normally. We're looking at ways to mitigate that here, but the other thing that we did this year was we funded an additional seasonal ranger for county parks and open space to help with enforcement up around Hesse and the 4th of July. And then we also were working with the city of Boulder to help them ask them to get more patrols to their campground there at the 4th of July trailhead. And then the other thing was we restricted parking at 4th of July trailhead. Right now it's about 40 spaces, and we did basically a special one-lane, two-way traffic to try to preserve as much parking as we could near the trailhead, but also to try and manage it a little bit better than what it's been in the past. Going forward, for next year, we're mainly going to be keeping a lot of things the same. We're going to be we're going to try and shift the park and ride locations to the high school and the park and ride, with the future being hopefully using the high school permanently. But that's going to depend on the school district giving us approval for that. And then one thing we're also looking at starting the shuttle a little earlier to kind of help with the N line, basically, so people can take the N line from Boulder, bring it up here, and then hop on the shuttle without it being, right now it's not quite coordinated, so that people wouldn't be able to do that right now. And the one thing, regardless of whether or not we're doing any traffic calming up here, is I do want to look at getting more no parking signage where in those areas where right now we don't have enough space for people to actually get outside of the white line. And then long term, you know, these are again really long term stuff. You know, we've talked like with the Forest Service about, you know, is there a possibility of them doing a permit system like they have at some other locations? Again, that's a long-term thing. And at this point, they don't really have a good answer for that. But it's kind of something that we are imagining here in the future will be the case. And then, you know, seeing if can we extend the shuttle to the 4th of July trailhead? Yeah, I already see somebody shaking their head. No, it's probably not going to happen. This is going to be something that requires a lot of road improvements. It's technically feasible, yes, but we're going to need, you know, funding and all that kind of stuff. So it's, you know, we don't know for sure that's going to happen. And then moving to something like paid parking or having another gate turn around somewhere permanently. Again, these are pretty major programmatic changes for the county. We would need, you know, additional personnel and a little bit of infrastructure, that kind of stuff, to actually make that work. So at this point, I can't guarantee. I don't even have really a date really for when something like that would happen. All right, let's talk about speed and safety here. So we all kind of have an idea of what we think what we feel like are appropriate speeds, and we'll talk about kind of how that affects with like with pedestrian safety in particular. But generally, and this is probably very obvious to all of you, more speed equals more severe crashes, and then also more speed generally means more crashes. Now, when it comes to that last part, it's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship. Some locations it's a little bit more obvious, that relationship, but other locations you could change the speed and it wouldn't necessarily make a big dent in safety. But how about what speed limits are doing? So speed limits are kind of a factor, obviously, in driver speed selection, but they're not the primary influence. So drivers kind of rely on their perceptual cues, their vision, even hearing, to actually kind of regulate their own internal speeds. And kind of the perception of a safe speed varies individually. It also varies based on your perspective. If you're driving, a lot of our system is set up to kind of help you anticipate and process information faster. But if you're walking along the road and somebody passes you, you know, that vehicle may or may not feel safe when they're passing you at a certain speed. So the big point here is lowering the speed limit alone without any kind of design change or constant enforcement is not going to result in lower speeds necessarily. And then going back to the pedestrian issue, you know, research here basically is pointing out that, you know, the risk of death, not necessarily the risk of injury, but the risk of death is going to be increasing dramatically as you go from about 20 to 40 miles an hour. Okay, going to speed management. We basically have a cycle at the county. You know, you look at identifying the issues, trying to figure out where problems are existing, then you go and identify countermeasures. Finally, you go implement countermeasures, and then you evaluate how that countermeasure, how these program projects are actually working. And how do you actually go about evaluating? There's going to be two main ways that that transportation looks at it. That's speed and crash history. In speed, we use the 85th percentile speed, not the average speed, as our measure of how fast people are driving. The 85th percentile is just the speed at which 85% of traffic is driving at or below. Now you might wonder, okay, what do you do with the other 15%? And it's important to keep in mind that this isn't like a broad distribution. We're talking about most people drive kind of an average speed, correct? So you see a lot of people driving around this average speed, and then it kind of fans out further. That's a normal distribution or a natural distribution. And here, as you can see, we did take measurements the last time we took measurements specifically looking at speed was August of 2017. We did 2 counters. I believe one was over here about between 6th and 9th, and the other one was over here, not too far from the intersection down here. And I characterize this as east and west end. So the east end over here is where we're seeing a lot more speed. The 80th percentile was 34.8 miles an hour. The speed limit is 25, remember? So that generally showing that a lot of people are, if you look at generally the pace speed, which is where the majority of vehicles are traveling, you're going to see that it's probably around 25 to 34 miles an hour. The average speed here, for reference though, being 30 miles an hour. And of course this is reflected in how many people are speeding. 86%, the average exceeding 31.2 miles an hour. West end, here we see a little bit slower. If you, for reference, 10 miles an hour is typically where we really worry about the speeds. 5 miles, if you're within 5 miles an hour, that's a good thing. So between 5 and 7, we're kind of in that iffy territory of, okay, it's getting bad, but not quite. It's not quite yet the worst. So again, 29 miles an hour, 85th percentile, average speed 24 and a half. And again, these were taken during the weekday, I should point out. So we don't know for sure exactly what's going on the weekends. So again, you're seeing you see it's faster, and that's still like that 85th percentile of being almost 5 miles an hour. That's still not great, but that's within the 5 miles an hour. So we're pushing that limit there of being into the unacceptable territory. And now turn to crash history. So we typically look at 5 years. This is because it's easier. You have a lot less change happening between time periods. In this case, that's not quite the case, but I actually looked at 5.5 years of history here, which we just recently got. So January 2014 to June of 2019, which is the most recent that we have available. There were 7 crashes between the Ski Road intersection and the end of the pavement. Is where I was looking at. That's about 2.5 miles, I believe. The analysis period includes multiple changes though, so keep in mind, we were using centerline delineators in 2014, 2015. We weren't doing anything in 2016, 2017. And then we had our chip seal with the 25 mile per hour signs here in the last couple of years. So we don't know exactly the impact that those had on the history, and it's kind of, these don't necessarily have enough time to really define a pattern for us. But the key things to point out here that from that history that we looked at is we did not have any injury crashes, which is good. We had no crashes involving bikes or pedestrians, also good. No reported wildlife crashes, though, sometimes you have the smaller animals, unfortunately, they just don't get reported. Or even the larger animals, sometimes, if it's not serious enough, they may not get reported. Our key note here is 4 of the crashes were speeding related, meaning that the driver was determined to either be exceeding the speed limit at the time or going too fast for conditions. So, maybe they were going the speed limit, but the speed limit wasn't appropriate, that's still, they can still have too fast for conditions there. And then of the 7 crashes, 6 of those crashes were what I call roadway departures, meaning that the vehicle left the roadway and then in many cases it was striking either an object, a mailbox, trees, that kind of thing. And then the one crash that wasn't was actually a side swipe crash, so I believe it was opposite direction. Okay, and then the other way that we kind of evaluate things is what kind of comments are we getting from folks? And this is the general summation of what I've been hearing for the most part. So you get speeding throughout, and then we've heard about shuttle speeds in particular. Some people say they're going way too fast. Other people say they're actually helping in slowing down the traffic. The other major concern that a lot of folks have relayed to me is that there's wildlife safety. We have a lot of potential collisions. We've seen a lot of animals getting hit. Again, I wasn't able to verify that in the crash history, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Pedestrian safety. People either walking, parking over here and then walking to the trailhead, or just in general, residents walking along Eldora Avenue. And then the curves in particular, this one down here, and then the one down all the way by Marysville, thank you. That's the, again, with wildlife there, and people are concerned about speeding there. And then one that's we got a couple of comments on was people running the stop sign there at 6th and Eldorado. That's maybe a little bit less of an issue for some folks, but others it has been. So now moving on to traffic calming. What is traffic calming? I'm not going to read that whole thing, but basically it's going to be looking at increasing both comfort and safety, typically for non-motorized traffic. And there's a number of physical or psycho-perceptual techniques to actually accomplish that. Now the big thing is that speeding will still occur. We're not going to be able to eliminate all the speeding, but the idea is that we're going to try and reduce the amount of speeding, and then also, reduce those people who do speed. We're trying to keep them down a little bit in speed. Okay, so this is the plan here. Basically, I have copies up here, which afterwards you can come up and grab. I don't have enough for everybody, unfortunately. So here, the big things that we're looking at are the main things that we proposed are center line delineators again. We actually did put in the plan speed tables, which I'll show you what all these examples are here shortly. But we are trying to maximize the spacing here, because unfortunately, if you do it too close, the spacing here is important because it helps regulate the speed. But the more devices that you put in, the more it's going to cost. So we're trying to maximize and put a balance here between the speed and the number of devices here. And then the other measures mostly are like signs and striping, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and so let's see. We'll go ahead and move on. Let's see. So in terms of signs and striping, this is one idea for how we might go about, defining kind of a gateway to Eldora. You already have a gateway sign, a community gateway sign that you have put in. One way is to just kind of use this to our advantage and to make sure people understand this is where the speed limits are changing. This is where the context changes from the rural highway-ish road to a main street in a small town site. So things here that we're looking at. So warning signs, a speed radar display sign, and then possibly, you know, an additional educational sign for community sign. And then I've also heard of, you know, people wanting to have some more warning signs here about the wildlife and the pedestrians. So in that case, I just kind of put those together on one sign. It probably won't look like that, but it won't be moose and pedestrians together, but we'll see. Again, this is the one on the right is kind of what it might look like from the other side. You know, putting in centerline delineators, since you already have that slower speed coming off of the dirt there. We wouldn't be able to do that with a potentially high speed approach on the east side, but that's one way again that you might be able to do it. And again, there's no definitive way to do this. It's going to be kind of up to what you all decide feels best. And then again, we're looking here at other ways that you can kind of enhance signage besides making it bigger. So you have you know, different borders, adding reflective elements, flags, even flashing lights. And then you might have seen on the plan that there's a couple locations, particularly around those curves, where we're looking at speed reduction markings. The idea here is that these markings start out wider and then they start to converge as you get closer to the curve, and that's kind of a psychoperceptual way of indicating people that you're speeding up. You need to, you know, slow down. Of course, one of the downsides is that they will get covered with snow. Speed display sign. Obviously, you probably all know what that is, but that's just one example here. We have that on Cherryville Road. So the picture that I showed you earlier of the centerline delineators, that's the way that we did it previously. We could do that same way again. There's also other types here. So you had the old version had delineators on either side of the yellow line. Here they're just right on top of the yellow line. This is actually at 55th Street. This is a quiet zone treatment. That the idea here being to prevent cars from trying to get around there when eventually the area will go to a quiet zone with no train horns, unless it's an emergency. But traffic circle. Understand this gentleman. Yeah, not a whole lot of fans here. I hear. So again, this is kind of what the proper look of it would be. Again, it's going to depend on, you know, a well-designed.
It's only for four-way traffic, but we don't have four-way traffic.
Right, exactly, and that's kind of the issue with the stop signs too. But
then they have to stop with the little tiny side roads. They're just going to go right through it.
Yeah, I mean, Boulder, for example, has a lot of, say, poorer examples of how that can go wrong.
And I live right there, and it
going on, going on there. But this is, you know, it doesn't have to be set in stone. You know, if you really want to try it, this is an option, just to do a temporary version. This is actually down in Denver. Speed table, again, that's probably the second least favorite thing on this list. In this case, I'm actually showing a raised crosswalk. You see those all over the city of Boulder. But it's the same idea. It's just you have that elongated bump, essentially, which helps to reduce kind of that jarring effect that you have with regular speed humps. And it's basically a flat top, so it's a table. Okay, and then some of the alternative options. Going back to the alternative for speed tables, speed humps. It's just basically your shorter, more parabolic shape. There's a lot more of that bump that you get from actually when you actually drive over in that and experience that. The other option here, it's still basically a speed bump, but in this case, what this would do is it gives you carve out. So if you have bigger vehicles, trucks and fire trucks, for example, this gives them the option to straddle these and kind of avoid slowing them down while at the same time still preserving the speed mitigation for smaller vehicles. And then again, we're getting into more of the realm of the more expensive, requiring more an expansion of the roadway here. So meeting islands, you know, this one's like kind of a gateway treatment here on Cherryville Road. Another option here, kind of at the four-way intersection, would be to make this a raised intersection, which it's basically the same as a speed table, just across the entire intersection. This is probably the most expensive one on this list. And then you're talking more of your horizontal shifts. So a chicane is generally a alternating curves, sometimes with parking, sometimes without. And then a lateral shift is just a lateral shift, so it's generally one little shift like you see here on Plateau Road. Again, this is probably something that's going to cause the footprint of the road to expand a little bit. So that's something that you have to balance out if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, and then how do we actually go about getting this approved? How are we doing this reach out? So this is the general idea. Obviously, we're still working on a lot of the details here with our speed management plan, but first things that generally a citizen comes out, Catherine, Lance, some of the other folks that we've had, they'll come out, ask us to do some kind of study to determine what can we actually do. And what we'll do is we'll go in, we'll do a speed study, and then the idea is that once we have that information of what speeds are, what the roads generally looks like, what kind of potential factors do we have to consider, we'll determine what kind of eligibility for these different devices that you have. Pretty much everything that we've shown you, you should be eligible for. And then we're going to send that back to the people who actually request it. And it's going to be up to them to kind of go and bring it to the neighbors, discuss it, and then when you're ready, meet with county staff and then say, okay, we're interested in doing some of these things, and then we will draft a conceptual plan, which is basically where we're at right now. So the conceptual plan, again, we kind of want to leave it to the requesters still at this point to actually gather the feedback and actually set up meetings or whatever they feel is appropriate to get the information out and get comments back to us. And then we'll go back and we'll take those comments and we'll look through them, and with that traffic circle, for instance, we'll take that out because that's the majority of comments actually come back and said, you know what, we don't actually want this. So then we'll draft the final plans and then look at doing a community vote. And I don't have the exact process for this outlined yet, but we imagine it's going to be a supermajority. Probably at least 60% of the community needs to approve the project. And then the actual implementation, funding needs to be considered, and that is above my pay grade at this point. I don't know exactly how or what funding is available yet for this for anything that we've discussed or planned so far. There have been options in the past for communities to actually contribute, but the thing is, obviously, with this, it's not the community's problem, it's people coming in from the outside a lot of the times that's causing a lot of the issues. So, it's a balance act here. And obviously, we'd be looking at construction. The hope is that, the hope is we'll be getting things approved by the mid-April, like tax day timeframe, so that way we can go to construction in the summer that same year. Obviously, since we don't yet have any approval process going, we're gonna be cutting it very close here. And then finally, once we get a project implemented, a year later, we need to go back and see, okay, is it actually changing speed? Is there less crashes? Again, a year is maybe not quite enough for crash information to really pan out a pattern, but it's at least a start. And that's it. That's kind of, we'll go ahead and open up for questions here. Yes.
So the last time anything was done, my only knowledge is that the speed and amount of traffic on this road, Klondike, quadrupled. So people going faster on the dirt road to skip all that stuff.
Yep.
So I hope your plan will include all the east-west roads, not just Eldorado.
And I second that.
Yes, that is definitely a concern, because that can happen. At this point, I don't exactly know for sure how that would look, because of, it's a dirt road, and so we don't have the same tools available to us.
Just don't
But-
maintain it,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's
the town
something-
of Med is only 20 on the dirt roads,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
I mean, it's 20 out over here too. Let's see, I think you were first.
Well, while we're on the topic of Klondike, I live on the west end, the intersection with Eldorado, and it's just a parking mess down there on weekends on that intersection, on the dirt.
Yeah.
And so when I expressed concern about that to whoever was on duty, they said, well, the signage, there's no white lines to enforce a no parking sign in that intersection where the asphalt goes to dirt. I mean, my only point is it's a problem, that intersection parking wise, weekends in the summer especially.
Okay.
Say right now it's a parking problem 365 days a year.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah,
especially when
Yeah, I
come
saw a couple
February,
of vehicles parked
come
there right next to
February,
the-
yeah, the weekend traffic again with the skiers and the snowshoers on that side of town. And then it's compounded by the fact that the snow piles up.
But the snow
and-
piles up
But
and
people
can't
will
pull
park
off.
anywhere, including on my property, and they've done that before.
Mhm.
So it's not just traffic, but it's parking as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you were first.
My question is whether you have implemented photo radar as a calming tactic, so speeding tickets.
So that's actually going to be more of a question for the sheriff's office. I don't know if you can answer that, Gary.
We have not looked at any of that. I don't think that the county is on board with something like that.
Because
You would have to talk to the county planners, and it could be a perception thing, that it's just a money generator. Something along those lines, that it's there to generate funds.
I just think about it, you're talking about behavioral change, psycho, whatever, perceptual
One thing
things.
that I have heard is
Well,
that
there's one.
we may not actually have that ability within the state law. Basically, the way that I understand it is that they've given the power to municipalities, but not to counties necessarily, based on where they put this law in the statutes. So that's something that it may be legislative change that has to happen first. And then
So a couple things of talking about enforcement. What good is a speed limit if you're not going to enforce it? So you said there was lowering speed limits and there were criteria for lowering your speed limit. We're not lowering. It's 25. It's just not ever enforced. And I know the sheriffs aren't all equipped with radar equipment when you even come up on a regular basis and
We
witness a speeder. I've been told in the past that you didn't have them in all your cars. in sheriff.
In the majority of our patrol cars, we are equipped with radar.
I stood out at the end of my driveway with the sheriff one day, and he took his radio and a coffee cup and said, well, I can simulate radar, but I don't have radar in my car. That's sad.
How long ago was that?
Probably a couple years ago, but I talk to the sheriffs on a regular basis, and I never see anyone with a radar gun targeting speeders. Okay, that's my first thing. In your long-term options, you neglected to include a long-term options of parking in a trailhead at the ski area to
Yes.
alleviate some of the pressure
Yes.
on our own trailheads here that just can't handle any more people, shuttle, cars, otherwise. There needs to be a long-term option that alleviates the pressure on our trailheads.
Yes.
And you talk about speed in Eldora, and it's not just the speed, but it's the number of cars. And again, if you have fewer cars coming through because you have another trailhead, that helps the situation. And if you can enforce the speed limit for the cars that do come through. Lastly, you talked about crash history, and that was your criteria. It's more about the impact on the residents
And the near
and the
misses.
wildlife than it is crash history.
The near misses.
That can't be your only criteria.
Although we did have a pretty good one this last May,
There,
crashed by your house that
Yeah.
was in front end of the car.
No, this
So
May.
in the lateral shift you talked about, we already have a lateral shift with the number of our residents who park along the side of the road, or dogs or whatever, pedestrians. There already is a lateral shift. And then I want to know how the vote would happen.
Yeah, so again, the vote, I don't have the exact details yet. Kind of what we're envisioning currently is, we would distribute plans to residents, either through mail or, either as having you reach out to, or, well, have email, mail, whatever we can, however we can actually do that. Have a public meeting again, kind of like this, and then, distribute voting forms of the kind. And so you would send that back into us, indicating what your preferences are, and then again, we're looking at probably a supermajority, and then
Is this
also
all
having,
just residents, or is this all property owners?
so all residents at this point.
And that's
So we're
residents
looking
of
at
the area or on the impacted road, is there a preference given to those?
Mostly on the impacted road, so we would be looking at the ones who are directly impacted, say along Eldorado, maybe even Klondike. Again, still need to figure out that specifically, but it's kind of the idea that we would be looking first to these residents in this area to actually make that choice.
What sample size would you need? You never get all residents together.
Right, so
Never
we
hear it
would
same
probably
time.
looking at either having a minimum number, but also still having somehow a majority. So we still need to, so if we didn't have that minimum number of votes, you wouldn't get approved. But we also have to be careful because, you know, if there's still, say, just right up to that number of people approving it, then, you know, we don't necessarily want to go against that will either.
Let's say we get the 60% plus on those people that weigh in, but it's 40% of the residents that weighed in.
Right, so if it were only 40%, then we'd probably be looking at, it wouldn't be approved. Like, we wanna make sure that we have a majority of residents aware of and actually participating in the process. And I saw them waiting back here.
So my name's Richard. I want to say thanks to everybody who came out today for wanting to work together to create some type of solution that benefits the community. I know it's tough. I live on Klondike, and I want to second and third and fourth everyone here who lives on Klondike. I felt a little dismissed a few minutes ago when it was said, well, it's a dirt road and this isn't anything personal. But it's like, oh, Klondike's just a dirt road. We can't put speed bumps or anything in there. something really has to be done on Klondike as well too. Anything you do on Eldorado is gonna force more traffic on the Klondike, and we see people flying down there all the time. There are things such as stop signs. That's something, and that's just one thing thrown out there. It doesn't require, road maintenance to come in and take care of. Doesn't get in the way of graders or things like that, which we greatly appreciate over on that road as well. Thank you.
And I keep raising my hand.
I know.
So,
Let's see.
sorry,
You
I'm
were
gonna just
first,
jump in
and then
because,
I'll let you go.
yeah, cause I've been waving for a while. So I'm actually on Bryan Avenue, but, I have an idea, for weekends that I'm hoping people can get behind, and I've emailed it to the county, but I think in national parks, we have shuttle access only after certain hours. So I'm like, we have the shuttle system, we have the parking system, why not after 7:30 a.m.? When we know those trailheads are already full, just say, no more parking, you will get ticketed between 7:30 and 4:30 or whatever if you arrive. And then we won't have, because 95% of our traffic is people coming up, finding the parking is full, and coming back down. You guys have people up there having tickets, you've got the shuttle parking, you've got the rangers that know when it's full. I just think it's an easy solution, and then we won't have people parking in your spots and like going down Klondike, and it just,
I think we should take a vote on that.
So
I think everybody
because I'm like, that should not be that hard, and it doesn't really cost that much more.
And
Everybody
the
should
shuttle
go
is
there.
there.
the parking
shuttle,
there's no place for the people to park to get a shuttle is the
The
problem.
high school
The thing
is
that-
gonna open
The
up.
high school's got this whole, I don't know what deal they have with the ski area, but
Yeah.
we've tried to do that before and the school district has nixed it. I have been saying for the last 15 years, there's a parking lot up on the hill that takes over 1,000 vehicles. And if you just even use the new north parking lot of 500, which are now in the process of building a second 500 car parking lot up there on this side of their main gate. The damage has already been done environmentally, a road is already going up there. The majority of people that come here to park are going to Lost Lake, and it's an easier, less strenuous hike to Lost Lake from there than it is from here. And I think the county needs to take some kind of responsibility to make that happen, and the fact that our issue here with excessive traffic started when they closed Brainerd for a year. And at the little gate, they handed out a piece of paper saying, oh, well, if you've come all this way to go to the mountains, you can go to Hesse and go there. And there were like 10 different places up here listed as alternatives for Brainerd. And Hesse was number one. So then they came to Hesse. And then the next year when they opened Brainerd and jacked up the price to get into Brainerd, people said, well, shit, I'm not gonna pay that. I'm just gonna keep going to Hesse where it's free. And that's where the increase in traffic and cars and issues and everything started here. So the county, I think, needs to step up and say, we need to make something happen with the Forest Service to get something out of here and get it up the hill.
That's good feedback.
Okay.
The other thing is, it's not that the traffic just picks up all of a sudden at the Shelf Road. It picks up as soon as they turn. It's all that ski traffic that comes in. When you're leaving, going toward the east, you really better watch out who's in the wintertime.
Yeah, I
Who's
know.
going up that
But
road.
the ski area was here before we were here, before the
Oh, I
majority
just
of
want
us
to make a
living here was here.
suggestion.
So
Have you ever heard of a road diet?
So we walk
Yes.
here knowing we live by
That's
a
actually
ski
kind
area,
of
so
a
deal with your ski area.
partially a traffic calming option. Yeah.
It's perception, as you say.
Well,
You put a road diet in and you put bike trails on each side or one side, and you have that perception that you're always looking out for a runner or a bike rider.
Can I
It
say
just
something
creates
here?
perception.
There used to be a yield sign for the people that were coming up to go to the ski area, and it's not there anymore. It's not there. And I don't know why, but I mean, I thought it was there, so I thought I had the right of way. And that's really dangerous if people think it's there and it's not there.
So could you repeat that? So the yield sign was on
Right where the ski area road comes into the main road.
It was a yield
So
to
we're
oncoming traffic
as
sign.
they're coming from the ski area.
No.
As they're going towards the ski area.
Yeah.
There used to be a yield
I
to
don't know when
oncoming
it
traffic
disappeared,
sign.
but it disappeared.
As far as I know, there's not like a yield sign necessarily, but there is the sign that says, yield to oncoming traffic.
No, there's no sign.
I saw it on the way up here, so.
Really?
But it's very tiny, it needs to be bigger.
That may be the case.
Yeah.
So
dangerous intersection.
I think the idea of limiting the traffic is also important in the terms of the wilderness areas. If you've hiked on a weekend up there, it's horrible. It's like a circus. And I think that the wilderness areas also can't sustain those numbers. And I think a permit process or like a parking lot, it's full, that's it, you go home.
But if they have a shuttle, they're still gonna be able to come.
Yeah, and that's
Right,
a
but
land,
there's
that's
still
gonna
a
be kind of a
limit.
land use
There's
decision
still a
in that.
limit to
Yeah.
that.
The county, the Forest Service, the Parks and Open Space, everybody kind of needs to come together and decide, okay, what's too much traffic, what's actually necessary. I think I saw you first.
My name's Matt, and I have a cabin in Eldora and a cabin up 4th of July. And I'd like to ask how residency is determined. My legal residence is not in Eldora or even 4th of July.
So, basically the idea that I'm thinking of is we'll basically be looking at each address, sending notification to each address, and then it's going to be kind of the, it's not necessarily that permanent residency is required, but that you actually live there at least part of the time. And I haven't actually, and that you actually bring up a good point of there are part-time residents here. I don't know if we have actually really discussed how that's going to work.
I don't think that matters. There's been some wonderful suggestions. Are you having someone take notes for you?
She's right there.
So, we've got.
And everybody gets a copy of this if they want.
I understand, but then someone has to sit down, listen to that, and start taking notes on all of that.
Maybe, I don't necessarily know if I have anybody lined up necessarily, but we'll be taking a look at it for sure.
Wouldn't a property owner be the person who would be voting on the issue as opposed to whether they live there or don't live there?
So, I kind of would like to, my personal opinion is that, the residents, even if they're temporary, maybe they rent from a property owner, they should also get a say, but for sure the property owners should get a say as well.
I'm just curious, because up at 4th of July, they've really put in a parking plan and everything that seems to work. I mean, they've really limited parking up there. And I was curious, Matt is up there, and I was just curious what you've been able to do. And there was actually a sign, I don't know if it was in the summertime or what, saying there wasn't traffic allowed up there at a certain point. And at Hesse,
Right.
But they all went to Hesse and turned around.
Well, I was just curious about what they've done up there and if it's been effective, in terms of people parking everywhere. I know, I mean, I totally agree with you about the shuttle. And the shuttle was first, put into place with the idea that there wouldn't be any parking on the dirt road. And then they put in the shuttle and didn't take the parking off.
Yeah.
So that didn't really get to the goal we wanted in the first place.
So if we shut it down on the weekend.
But
have
in
the
terms
shuttle.
of parking everywhere, it seems like there's really limited parking up at 4th of July now. And I was curious how you got that done and what's going on with that.
Well, our homeowners group up there, the North Fork Council, over the year, for 40, 50 years has been complaining about the traffic. And we, I shouldn't take any credit, but we as a group talked to the county, pleaded with the county, and the county would always say that they can't do any enforcement because there's no signage. So finally, as of last spring, one day I was going for a walk and I saw the little posts go in indicating that signs were going to go in, and then sure enough in the spring signs went in and delineating where you could park and where you couldn't. And just say as of last summer, I had people parking on my the wildflowers that border the road, and even though the road is 50 feet or 60 feet wide, and the actual road is only like 25 feet wide, it's just awful to have people just drive up onto those wildflowers and then go to the bathroom in your yard, and they're still like a 15-minute walk from the trailhead, so they need to go to the bathroom somewhere. It's just became awful, and mostly on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So we talked to the county, and the county responded, and so now the parking went from roughly 200 to 300 on a typical weekend down to 76, and that's the trailhead and the approved parking areas, and so we're extremely happy with that. However, you know, that if that is putting an impact on the town of Eldora, absolutely we need to all have a conversation about that. So we're very extremely pleased with that. It's very important, and we don't want to lose any traction there. And I don't mean to like have my say right now, but I completely have from day one been saying that we need to be proactive about these people that come into town, and now they're getting. We'll see a ranger at close to Laura's house, where the dirt road and the paved road come together. Those people need to be told prior to them arriving into town that there's no parking. I really feel strongly about that we need to be doing better with that. We can have electronic signage of some sort, or people of some sort, or communication of some sort prior to them getting into Eldora. And that's been discussed, but in my opinion has not been.
They tried to do that, you know, with those signs that fold down, but
Well, the ranger told me last summer that when he was at the end of Klondike turning everyone around, because the parking was full, that he was not allowed to be, his bosses told him he couldn't be at the high school, he couldn't be at Marysville, he couldn't be anywhere before you got into the community.
What do you guys do about
So that
people
seems like
going up and
something
finding there's only 76 spots on the floor?
One of the things that really concern me is for the people that pull off to the side of the road. If it's a dry summer and you put a hot car on top of dry grass, you're going to have fires. For every one of those cars that pulls off the road and sits on top of the grass, there's a chance that it will ignite the grass and cause a fire.
On the parking issue, I'm like totally guilty of doing this. I'm over on Bryan Ave, so I jump on the shuttle at the stop sign. But I wonder if you're driving in from elsewhere, is that behavior creating parking problems for other people? Right, I just walk over from my cabin and jump on.
So
Right,
you say if they're
the shuttle
coming
will let me
from elsewhere
do that.
and then hopping on the
If
shuttle?
you're coming from elsewhere and parking throughout town and hopping on the shuttle, is the shuttle,
Yes.
onboarding and offboarding
People
Yes.
people like this?
Yes.
That I feel really bad about.
Yes, they park at my house.
They told the shuttle
And
people
they
not
hop on
to
the shuttle.
do it.
but I
Yeah,
think
the
they're
shuttle,
still doing
they're
it.
generally not supposed to be it, but in some cases they've been relaxed about how much they'll actually enforce that. It's safe to do so.
It seems like there's like these two issues, there's parking and there's traffic, right? And well, the traffic, meaning the numbers of people coming in. And I was thinking one thing, and I know a lot of people would be against this, but just not having people be able to park anywhere in Eldora, and then have residents have, you know, permits and be able. So you could really only park for 2 hours, say, if you didn't have a permit. That's really
important. Enforcement. We build the permit system, who's gonna hand out the permits, that kind of thing.
Right, that's
So,
true.
it's,
And then, you know, some people have suggested this really radical solution, which is to have a gate at Marysville and have it, why not?
Because it's public right of way, it's like the parking, it's public parking, and the gate, are you talking about like a gate across the road?
Yeah.
That's actually a good
That's a
point.
public roadway, so you cannot shut down access to a public roadway.
Okay, well, just some way to make people take the shuttle. I think the person who suggested that, 7:30, 8:30, whatever, we just can't have a shuttle and parking, it just doesn't.
Lance Smeltikop, 895 Eldorado Avenue. Hey Josh, thanks for coming up.
Yeah, of course.
Would you mind, do you have the capability to go back to the approval process slide? Because I have a couple questions there.
This one?
Yeah, thank you for writing it out at least as clearly as you can right now with the details that you can. I request and would involve myself if you would let us to be a part of this process, to define population, to define residents versus non, to look at plat maps, to look at ECA membership lists, or whomever we need to look at to get to the population that you think is the right one, so that we can come to the 60-40, whatever, at the end of the list. My involvement in this, I probably wouldn't be here if the traffic mitigation, speed mitigation plan that the county and the residents of Eldora had in place up until I think 2013 stopped. We had a plan. Every summer, spring, the ballards would be put up in certain places, and I understand some of the ballards were poorly placed in front of people's driveways, which shouldn't happen in the future. But we had a plan. We had funding was there because it was getting done. Now we're in a place after having a meeting somewhere, I think around 2013, similar to this at the firehouse, where a couple of people who were sour on the mitigation plan killed it. And now we're back to having to go through the whole thing again, involving your time, involving the deputy's time, involving all of our time, and many other people in the planning and in the road crews to get to a sufficient mitigation plan again. So I just want to ask, where's that funding, and can we use that for whatever we come up with as we go forward here? Because we had funding, it was getting done every year, and then it got killed, the legs got cut out from under it, and here we are.
It was Ted Warren.
Ted was the one that went to get it put in place.
Right, exactly.
People who cut up the legs out, I wasn't there at the meeting,
Yeah,
so
I
I don't know if anyone else was, but I don't want that to happen again, because we do have a problem of speeding on not only Eldorado, but Klondike, and through our village, to get your ass to the trailhead to go out and relax. And somehow we've got to figure out, and I look to you to help solve this. I don't want to tell you what is the right mitigation plan, because I'm not a traffic expert.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us look to the county to say, we can help quantify the problem. We now identify there is a problem. Here's what we believe would be the right implementation proposal to put in place, and then we can vote on it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Right. So yeah, again, that's going to be, we're looking at this as a county-wide thing, because obviously speeding in Eldora is not, or speeding is not happening only in Eldora. It's I probably have at least 5 or 6 other locations that are on hold at this point. I have a couple who actually squeezed in right before the deadline. So we've got so that we're going to be doing a couple of projects here next summer. But yeah, it's going to be, we're going to be looking at a county-wide process first, and then as we go through the individuals, working with the individual communities, we'll probably have to tailor that process a little bit to each.
And I'd hate to see it get to the point where someone does have to get hit, because it's only by the grace of, like Catherine putting up signs, like, because I read them, but I am constantly walking my dog on the road, and at 7 a.m. I'm saying, we're constantly, slow down, or I'm gonna get hit someday because I step in front of them so that they slow down. It's like a forced way to get them to slow down, because they are gonna hit somebody. So I think the only reason we haven't had any more accidents as far as pedestrians or animals or children is because we are trying to do what we can. And like Lance said, this has to fall more to the county so that we don't have to make this effort.
A lot of the neighbors put up safety cones on both sides of the street.
If you don't mind, I'm
And
just
do
going
it
to go
on
ahead
the-
and go with this gentleman here.
I caution you to be very careful how you define who gets to vote and what percentage is necessary. I'm a member of a condominium association that requires 50% of those eligible to vote have to vote in order for a vote to count. And so nothing gets done because you can never put together 50% of the population to determine who your 60% are. So it's very difficult to get a wide-based vote.
Well, it has to be both,
change.
like you said, because a lot of the homeowners up here aren't even here, so they're not gonna care. If there's renters, it has to include the residents, both.
I'll go back to you because you were saying something.
I'm talking about community self-mitigation. A lot of us put up safety cones on either side of the street, right off of the hard surface, some on the hard surface to slow traffic down. So, you know, we're doing things like that. Traffic going up, you wouldn't need that Forest Service guy that stands at the end of Eldorado, because the traffic's backed up going up that dirt road to the Hesse Fork. It's one-way traffic. If a bus is in there, for sure, there's no way. There's a gridlock at that point. So all of that chalk marked parking has gotta go. That road's not wide enough to accommodate that traffic.
Well, and my concern is, like, what I'm hearing from you is this is a speed issue. And it's not just it's a speed issue, it's a resident parking impact issue, and it's a sheer volume of the freaking traffic issue. Like, it is constant cars back and forth on the weekend. I went for a 1 hour run once down Eldorado and counted 170 cars in a 1 hour period while I was running. I mean, it is just way too much traffic. So I like the it's not that I don't like the speed mitigation suggestions. I think they're great except for the traffic circle. But we also need just a sheer reduction in the number of cars, whether that's a combination of parking and new trail access or shuttle only after a certain amount, or having more efforts further down the road to turn people away rather than waiting till they get all the way to Hesse and then turning them back and saying parking is full. Like, we just gotta do something about the volume of the traffic that's coming. And if we can turn them around faster, that will by necessity also reduce the impact on the parking on people's property.
And if that's done, it's only gonna get worse. I mean, there's more and more people coming to the Front Range,
Right.
Colorado, every week, right? It's only gonna get worse. There's only gonna be more pressure on this backcountry. So, and it just, you know, it's up to the county to do something, as far as I can see. You guys gotta take a leadership role. A long-term solution.
That's right. In all fairness to Josh, when Catherine and I met with him, what was it now, a year and a half ago first, right? And put together a problem statement of the speeding issue. We consciously, with him and to him, scoped it just as a speeding issue, so as not to try to boil the ocean, but it does not reduce the importance of the validity of the fact that we have a parking issue, we have volume issues. And I don't know how you, in your department, want to handle it, if you want to group these together, or if you want to treat them as separate but distinct and kind of joined issues. But that's why his doesn't include the parking, because we asked to just, let's focus on one thing instead of trying to, you know, bite the elephant at a time kind of thing.
It does seem like the amount of traffic is kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
more
We're treating
concerned
it
about
as
the
a-
amount, because honestly, if you had 1/10 of the traffic, we would still have a reduction in the number of people who sped.
Right.
You're absolutely
And
right.
parked.
Kind of part of the way I look at this is we're not quite yet to the point where we can actually limit the amount of people, because we still need the decisions from coming from the Forest Service, the land managers.
Well, you guys have to get together.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. We're working on that. But yeah. So you know how do you mitigate the impact from all this high volume, and that's going to be slowing down traffic at least for now, until we can actually get to a point that, you know, some decisions are made and we actually can implement more long-term decisions. Yeah, go ahead.
I love what this woman recommended back here. Take a negative and turn it into a positive, and just because it seems like you want to allow people to experience the beauty, you know, it's not going to stop. Everybody always thinks that I'm going to get front row at the grocery store. That's what they're thinking up there too. So everybody's going to keep trying. So open up the upper north lot, like you said, at the ski resort.
And limit the parking though.
Yeah, maybe this could be just shuttle people.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be
So
for
you have
the,
You can eliminate the
sort of
shuttle.
dichotomy.
The RTD bus already is trained to go to the ski area, so you eliminate the shuttle because they can take the RTD bus all the way to the ski
Well, then
area.
you could have a shuttle from the ski.
But they have to get from the
And you
ski
would have to
area.
have
No,
new
you create a
trails.
trailhead
But you
from
would
there.
have to have new trails if you had a shuttle.
I think you still
But
can't
that's
put more
like a
people
fine
into our
line.
trailhead.
Right, and that is a permit thing that, like with Eldora and the Forest Service, that's kind of between them also, as far as, you know, we can push them as much as we want, but ultimately the Forest Service and Eldora have to kind of work together to be able to approve that. I believe there was another person back here.
Yeah, I just had a question, and you referred to a county-wide issue as far as speeding. So in that scope, what quantifies a priority? Does the county look? I would say that Eldora and the Hesse Trailhead, 4th of July Trailhead is a pretty heavily used county area. So what is driving the priority to put attention to this, or any other place in the county?
So yeah, that's one of the things that we're looking at with this, countywide process is how do we prioritize which projects are getting done first? And in a lot of ways, in the past it's been kind of, who's been the squeaky wheel essentially. We're trying to get more towards a more quantifiable, more definitive way of actually quantifying. Is it is it speed? Is it volume? That kind of thing. So again, the details aren't quite worked out yet, but that's kind of what that's the direction that we're going here. Go ahead.
You mentioned timeline. Do you expect something to be implemented, by the beginning of summer?
So that is a little bit difficult for me to answer right now. The plan here is to try and get our speed management plan done first. That way we have this process set up, and then hopefully, once we get that done, we'll see, working with like Catherine or whoever wants to come up and actually say, let's get this process going again. Seeing how long that's going to take. I don't know if we'll be able to do that by the beginning of summer, to be honest with you. But hopefully, like I said, that April is kind of the hopeful cutoff. We could go later. Maybe it's something that we implement at the end of summer. I don't know for sure. Yes.
Being familiar with how slow the process sometimes can be, is there a backup plan for a temporary installation of traffic calming of some sort that can be used this next summer? Because we certainly don't want to skip the whole summer, because it's just going to get that much worse. So you have to have something in place.
The mobile speed
Yeah,
unit? Or
I don't know. I'm not suggesting one over the
speed
other.
trailer, again, that's something that we do for all the residents.
Yeah.
You're welcome to keep requesting that, and we will try to target it again. I think for our heaviest usage, 4th of July,
Labor Day.
Labor Day was another one.
Yeah, that's very helpful. But can you put temporary delineators or temporary more,
So
I guess signage
That's
is-
something
I
that I
don't
think
know.
maybe we should maybe discuss here. The temporary stuff, because again, we've had a lot of issues with some of that temporary stuff that's been getting put out here. We're not in favor of doing anything without further community approval. But if we need to have some kind of temporary meeting here to vote on a temporary solution here for the summer, I'm all for that.
Well, we're all here right now.
Let's- yeah.
We're all here.
Yeah.
This is the biggest.
We're the interested
We're not
parties.
gonna get a group like this again.
We can vote on it.
Nikki, did you have something to add first?
I was just gonna suggest we could
I mean, yeah, I
continue
think
talking
the
at
rules
Salto,
will
right?
have
Yeah.
That support here.
Well, we need an official person, yeah. So why don't we vote now, and then you can bring that back to the county and say.
How many of us want it to happen?
First,
It could be just a, this could be just a temporary vote of showing what people
Well,
are
I like
interested
Lance's
in,
idea of
and maybe
going
what
back
they
to the
absolutely don't want.
Minimum,
Good area.
Oops.
Lance's idea, what?
the minimum.
Well, we had an approved, my point was we had an approved traffic speed mitigation
I
plan.
remember that.
It was implemented, it was executed for how many years, Randy? 4 at least? I think, maybe 5.
Guessing probably.
I don't think it was very costly to the county. They came in and glued some ballards in 4 locations. And then in the fall, they were taken out by the snowplow when we had
And
first snow.
we need those
Picked up
signs
in the
back that
spring.
you said weren't gonna be brought back this summer. We need those 25-mile-an-hour
We need 'em.
cones.
Yeah. So even if
Those-
it's
those
not
are the
that, but my
minimums.
point was, we had funding. I'm sure it's no longer earmarked for us and just sitting in a drawer somewhere, right?
Yeah,
It went
it's not
into a
like-
general fund and it's been blown
We're
on
waiting,
something else,
so-
who knows, maybe lights somewhere.
Well,
But
and I think it's the
there
flood
was a
too,
plan, there
Lance.
was funding.
There was the flood in 2013, and that originally stopped some of the funding and went towards the flood. That was
Well, last I
partial,
checked,
probably partial.
the delineators were, still in place in 2015. That's actually when that picture at the beginning
Okay.
was taken.
So just
Okay.
that.
But that
Covers
actually
that.
does bring up a good point. We still have those costs from the flood. FEMA has been a little bit hesitant to be reimbursing us. We're appealing, we're hopeful, but that's a future impact that obviously we'll be also considering.
So if we just took a vote on, say, like the 25-mile-an-hour signs that were in the middle of the road, I got personally a lot of good feedback on that. People saying that they did help. They did slow traffic down. People that were mindful, at least, were then aware of the 25.
And there was something in the middle.
Yeah. Is that, can we do that now? And just so you get an idea of who's for those and who's not? Like that.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
that's what I think
go
they're
ahead.
asking for.
Well, could we actually go through the different proposals
Or deals.
real quickly,
Kind of
like, and
look at
just get a
them.
general
Yeah,
feedback?
ones.
Yeah.
Sure.
Straw
It's just,
A straw vote, there you go.
Straw vote, yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think we know what the traffic circle vote's gonna be.
Yeah.
Just,
That
we
was
might
a
not
good
need to
Josh,
vote
by the
on
way,
that one.
sticking that in.
Nothing like.
You got people's attention, right?
Brought 'em here.
The delineators are okay as long as it's not by someone's driveway.
Right.
Because every time we try to get in and out of our car, we had the cars come too close to us to be able to get into the car because they're trying to get around those things.
Or along a zone where there's already legal parking,
So,
because
like,
then
when
there's
they're-
nowhere
so if you
to
had,
place.
say, the delineators and parking on this side, you don't want that, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Is it an option, I don't know, but I've seen all over the country that, and even in the sort of the dividing lines going down the canyon, those divots that are in the asphalt, that when you run over them,
The rumble strips, yeah.
the rumble strips that actually, if you're going too fast, it gets your attention.
It jars you.
So
Is that an
are you
option?
saying, like,
Yeah,
is that
definitely.
or on
Pardon
the
me?
actual roadway?
On the roadway, going
On the
across the
roadway.
roadway, like before you get to a toll booth.
Right, okay.
Or a
Yeah,
stop
that's generally the kind of how they're used, right? They
Yeah.
warn you before you hit a hazard. That's technically an option. Keep in mind that, you probably don't want them next to your house. But say, maybe down by the, Maryville corner there, before you hit that, maybe that's a potential location. So that's, it is kind of an option. We have not done anything like that lately, but, again, it's an option. So,
Can we go to a straw poll?
yeah.
And some of your
I'd say
major
let's
line
go
items?
ahead and, do that. Let's see here.
I'm writing it down for
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the temporary solution of like a 25-mile-an-hour sign on the road. Raise your hand if you are in favor. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty much all.
As long
I
as-
think I see a few holdouts, but
As long as you only do Eldorado, I'm against it. All you're gonna do is force everybody to come on the dirt road conduct. That's all it did last time.
Okay.
Can some of those be put on the
There's not,
As
there's
well.
not, there's not much.
There's no room.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not
Yeah,
quite
we'll have to
enough
slow
room.
It seems like big rocks and everything.
The side of the road, it doesn't have to
No,
be
it
the middle of
doesn't.
it.
No. Next item.
Okay.
The next item, let's see, temporary delineators on Eldorado, or not temporary, seasonal delineators on Eldorado Avenue.
What
Sort
do
of,
you say?
So these ballers, I call them delineators. But,
They're ballards.
they're reflector posts, technically they're not bollards, but they're reflector posts.
So Josh, I have a quick question on that.
Yes.
So why, if it's voted for the linears or bollards or that white sign there, why can't a 25 mile per hour sign be attached to that?
Yeah, because I think that.
Make it a
this
combination.
sign
You get double
was
the effect.
addressing, some specific concerns that have been brought up, about, you know, bikes getting kind of pinched, or bikes and pedestrians getting pinched in this area. Obviously, we don't actually want people trying to pass in that area, but, you know, it's,
Common sense
you know, it's common sense, ultimately. So I'm sorry, again, one more time, raise your hands if you're in favor. Okay, so I'm seeing less people in favor, but more, still looks like the majority in favor.
I just have one question about that.
Yeah.
So, if you don't put them in places where there's legal parking, it seems like there's not gonna be any place for them because it seems like it's legal to park along the road.
So I mean, ultimately, that's one of the things that we'd have to say, okay, you're no longer able to park between here and here.
Right.
And of course, we gotta also balance that with maybe some of the, you know, the resident parking that's around here.
Yeah, Audrey, with that one in particular, it's right by my house. I know to the left of that, there's not enough room for even a Subaru Forester to park outside the fog line without rolling down the embankment.
Which
On
happens.
But
this
it's still
side,
legal. And
if they
somebody
wanna roll
said-
down the embankment, sure.
But somebody said that you can't have those if parking's legal.
Well,
And I'm just saying
they're
this
not
week.
gonna be able to make it legal, park
Yeah,
legally,
okay.
be off the
Well,
road.
what
Right,
you
we
said.
could, we could
You-
make
you
it,
answered
we
my
could make
question.
it not legal to park
You
next to
answered,
those.
yeah, thank you.
I made the point of up at my house where there currently is legal parking, if you put delineators there too, now
Well, it
everyone's
should
just
be
gonna go on
legal.
the other side of the delineators
Right. It
to
should be
avoid the
legal
parked
everywhere.
cars.
Including the shuttle, I saw that happen.
Yeah.
It should be legal anywhere.
But that's because people were parked and there wasn't enough
But then
room,
but then-
so they had to go around.
Okay, so the next one was speed reduction markings. This is the one that goes on the pavement and it starts out really long separations and then it kind of converges. It gives that optical illusion. Of course, it's only during the summer if it's covered by snow, so, who would be in favor of seeing this on the corners where we currently have, you know, that potential for sight distance or speeding?
As a temporary solution?
As a permanent solution. We would have to maintain it, but it is permanent.
Are there any specifics about how well that works?
So,
Yeah, it seems like a lot of effort.
Yeah.
so there's generally pretty good, actually, effectiveness here. At least, you know, I believe anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7. Usually it's more in the, like, the 3 to 5 area. But again, the idea here is, let's see here, as far as effectiveness goes, you know, I'd have to probably get a little bit more as far as like if you put them on a straightaway and then it's, there's no, you know, immediate hazard that they're approaching, they're not as effective. But if you approach like a curve, that usually tends to make it a little bit more effective. So it looked like the majority has your hands raised for that. It's not on the list, but going back to the rumble strip idea, rumble strips before or after certain curves in the area. Is there any in favor
Temporary or
right now?
permanent?
Permanent. It would be permanent.
So they'd be indentations versus bumps, right?
Right, exactly.
Oh, indentations versus bumps?
It's too noisy.
I think the bumps would work.
I think bumps are better. I think it's
Well,
too noisy.
Right, we're
Noise
talking about
impacts.
when we're talking about bumps, we're not talking about the speed bumps, right? We're talking
Oh,
about
right,
the
the little thingies
the
that
little
go- the-
grooves in the roadway.
Like down the center line on the canyon.
Down the center line on the
You
canyon,
go
yes.
over, you're gonna get taken up.
Exactly.
Put it across
I think in the valley, that noise would echo.
They just go right over.
Horrible idea.
It's
It's
very
horrible.
noisy.
Right, right, I don't
It'll
know.
fill it with snow, but that's unfortunately just a bad thing.
Okay, I think that's a no.
That's a no? Okay. All right, the speed display signs.
Yes.
Yep, that looks like everybody. So,
I think those.
Klondike too.
exactly, I was just gonna ask, okay, locations, east and let's say east end of Eldora, yes?
Yes.
West end of Eldora.
Yes. As they come out.
Along Klondike.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, let's see. Moving on. All right. Traffic signal.
Reading all the emails, it seemed like the most popular.
You didn't spend a lot of time and money trying that.
Just kidding.
We like, Josh, I just want to point to a lot of the comments I read had to do with the integrity of the area and keeping that look and feel of the old mining town right there.
Except all those signs are not gonna achieve that.
Well,
Signs.
but if they're,
For now, we're saying temporary, right?
I'm
Some of
just-
the signs are temporary and.
Right, so the signs are temporary, yes.
Yeah.
The permanent
she's
radar
right.
speed display sign, though, that would be.
Right, no.
Sorry.
permanent
well, and as
signs
long as they're,
are
I mean,
permanent.
they can be placed in a way that so they're not too obstructive. But I feel like at that particular spot is kind of a cool little, from what I've gotten to know about the history of Eldora and everything, it's just like we want to preserve that look there and also not disturb the buildings and the property. I don't know, I think it's kind of special because that feels like the center of town. And also I do see a lot of people not stopping there. So one of my suggestions would be to put like those really light LED lights around the stop sign to bring attention to it because it does kind of blend.
Yeah.
It does.
And
Okay, so
having
yeah, that's-
maybe something in the middle of the road, like the 25 mile an hour signs that sit right in the middle of the road, having a stop sign that sits right in the middle of that intersection might also be effective. Like a freestanding stop sign.
I'm not sure if we have the space for it, but we could see maybe.
Okay.
So actually going back to that, let's go ahead and say for flashing LED signs, who is in favor of doing that at the intersection there at 6? Or I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Okay.
Well, it doesn't
I
have to be
live on
flashing.
the corner of 6th and Eldorado. And that is the one thing that concerns me the most, particularly about the traffic circle, is the headlights that come right into the windows. As if there's any movement or turn. And as, you know, I do want to stop people, but I do not want a flashing red light constantly in my face.
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean
She
that.
said reflective.
I just meant like those really, have you seen they almost look like the sparkle lights, but they're really soft. They're
Maybe
not,
some reflective.
and they're not supposed to be flashing.
Like
It's
the
just,
ones down
it's
in
just.
Boulder on Canyon, like when the people cross, those?
No. Anyway, sorry I don't have a picture.
Very
You
localized.
can make those radar activated so that they don't flash 24/7. Is that an option?
What do you mean
Well,
radar?
if it flashes every time a car comes by.
Right, exactly. If it only flashed when cars came by, would that be an option?
That would, if I lived there, it would be obnoxious.
It would be really obnoxious.
Maybe just some way to get people to actually stop there.
No, it stops
Like,
in the middle
in general?
Eldorado, a stop sign in the middle of the road on each, where they're supposed to stop, not for the 6th Street line, but
Right,
in the
yeah.
middle of the
I
pavement.
think that's what she was
sign.
saying.
That would be more visible. It wouldn't have to flash, highly reflective. I mean, I get it, I hate flashing lights, so that would make me nuts.
Yeah, he said he just has to see about the space.
Yeah, basically.
Whether
you know,
there's physically
if
those
it's
spaces.
stop signs there, now we can actually get that sign to fit on there without
I
being
personally
too much
thought
of a
the
squeeze.
raised intersection idea was interesting.
Yeah, we
And I'd
understand
never heard
expensive.
of that before.
We'll come back to that one. But as far as having the LED signs on the stop signs, can I get a raised hands for that? Yes or no?
I think
I'm
all the
looking at
signs should
no.
be temporary until we figure out how we want them to be left.
Okay.
On the weekends.
Am I the only one?
Okay, how about any other treatment? So, the non-electronic treatments here, is there any interest in that? Okay?
I like the idea of the 25 being interstate size,
So in terms
where they
of-
are.
And in terms of Klondike, would Klondikians agree to locals only? One way? Locals only?
Could we do that? That would be
So,
awesome.
Again, like, again, it kind of comes down to, it's a public road, you can't say close it off, but, I mean, there are, and the fact is, like, who's gonna enforce that? Is ultimately the issue. is-
Well, you're just trying to discourage people who aren't locals from thinking that, oh, here's another
It's a
road
bypass.
parallel, it's like a frontage road, I'll just take that instead.
Psychological barrier.
A psychological barrier, there you go. Okay, so, I mean, it sounds like there are people who would be generally in favor of that, if that's something we were able to do.
And that's a one-way though.
Not to, not making it one.
What if it was one way from west to east?
Every driveway would have to have a sign, it'd be a mess.
Right, I
It
mean,
wouldn't be
basically.
real, it would just be.
It's not making it a one-way, but making it.
Like they did at Warren.
That's what they did on the
Right.
East West End, right?
Just makes everybody
Just
else.
apply to everyone else.
And the locals know.
It would be meaningless, but we could.
Wow.
Psychological.
Psychological, okay.
Order, order.
I have a question. Do you have any of the research or whether it's Boulder County or elsewhere, is there a diminishing return on total signage? Because honestly, come on, I mean, there's
Give
no
over
lack
10,000,
of
yes.
message here.
The general consensus in the traffic community is that you do not wanna do too many signs. You know, they, at a certain point, they lose their effectiveness. I mean, honestly, to me at least, it, becomes a bit of an eyesore.
Yes.
Too much urban in a rural area.
Except for the ones that are cute,
Just wondering
say
if it almost
barefoot.
brings us opposite reaction.
The handmade ones, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's go into the next one, speed tables.
This is the one where
This
it's
is the
raised.
flat top.
And that would just be at that
And
one
this would just
intersection.
be, no, this would be for, anywhere along Eldorado, so.
And is-
But it's raised, right?
Yeah, it's raised.
And is it striped or it's just a little backpack?
Right, so you'd have these markings here, you would not have this marking.
And it's
'cause
permanent.
We don't have any problem. Yes, and it would be permanent. So, raise your hands in favor.
What about snow removal for those? Is that?
So, it used to be in the past that we would not like to do that. In general, it's still kind of annoying to take care of this, but we can do it. So it's again, just kind of one of those things. If you guys voted no, our maintenance folks would be very happy, but if you vote yes, they'll take care of it still.
Aren't there temporary ones that get laid down for the summer and pull them up for the winter?
Giant rubber.
There are,
ones?
they're much more expensive.
Then maintaining one of these after the snowplows beat on it, one season would destroy it. I've seen the snowplow go by here.
Yeah, speaking of staying out of the
I can imagine that would be
Yeah,
less.
they're road graders.
Yes.
Don't laugh,
The
they are
advantage
road
to the
graders.
flat is it doesn't have the same
It doesn't
amount
have
of
that same
noise as a
bump.
bump.
Yeah,
Right.
doesn't have that same kind of.
Is this
I
what's
can't
installed
see,
at
what's the
Brainerd?
distance of the actual flat
I
over?
believe that, yeah, I believe that's what
Same
we
as
have on Brainerd.
Brainerd, okay.
What's that?
What's the distance of the actual table?
So typically, this is
Can't
gonna be about a 6-foot approach from the raise,
Yeah.
and then it's about 10 foot
Oh, I see.
between, and then 6 foot.
So you have them in Brainerd and you certainly have to plow the Brainerd Road.
Yeah.
So if that works
We
there,
do
it
have
would
them
work
up on
here.
Brainerd.
So let's say we go.
All right, let's have a vote. Let's see, looks like a majority. So obviously we already approved the speed tables. This is the speed hump. This is that shorter version. That's gonna be it's about the same height, but but again, you have that up and down. That's much quicker, much more successive, much more, impactful. Speed humps is there anybody in favor of that?
I guess it would depend how many there were, because the point what they were just saying is, sometimes people, as soon as they get over the hump, they speed up to make up that time. But if there's another hump, then they're gonna slow down. So how many
Right.
humps do you
I mean,
think?
it's kind of the same idea with the speed tables as well. You still have that slowing down and speeding up kind of thing, so.
I think anything like that on Eldorado is gonna make people go on Klondike. Us locals, but us locals in particular, how many of you, if you had to drive Eldorado from my house all the way through town, would avoid it by going down Klondike?
So, has
If you
anybody
go
been on
25 miles an
Trickey?
hour, you really don't have to slow down for those stations.
After
Those
they
are the,
reconstructed.
those are the speed humps,
They were.
correct, Josh?
So those are the tables, I
Those
believe.
are the tables.
Sleeping, yeah, I think.
Because I see signs that say hump.
Right, it
I
generally
mean,
is gonna be
general,
the
it's the
same.
general idea, if anybody's been up Brainerd Lake Road,
It works.
that gives you a general idea of what you're going to be looking at.
And it's a
Is it
25,
something on
so
long-term,
same
Or is it just like?
as
right there?
Eldora,
So,
Eldorado.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I think it's.
I mean,
But at least it slows people down,
right, between humps, like if you put too much distance between them,
We need to
people
think,
will
I
speed
think
back
we
up.
need to think more on this one.
Right, that's
No
kind of
more
the thing, so.
I don't think it's
I
a
have that on the
true
plan.
vote. I like
We
it.
have it,
I like it too.
you know, alternating between tables and delineators on the plan. Right now, I believe it's like 600 feet, which is pretty much the maximum of how far you could go without, you know, having it be too far apart.
But can I have a comment too?
Sure.
That it seems like, you know, when people have to slow down and then they speed up, it's noisier for the people that are living near that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something I've heard too, so.
I mean, that's what I've heard, but I don't really know.
And then with like the humps, for example, the noise of just people going over them can be an issue as well. Okay. So as an alternative to the speed hump or even the speed table, the speed cushion here where you have little cutouts that large vehicles can actually drive over without having to go and actually be bumped, essentially. Would there be anybody in favor of this?
Do you have examples of where this is some already installed places where we?
So the only example I could think of was on, it's actually a road I commute on every day. It's in, I believe it's Edgewood, just to the west of Folsom in Boulder. And what's that?
Union Church?
Yes, exactly. And
Does it work?
so apparently they were having issues with passenger cars. They didn't get quite the dimensions right, and they were having people actually go around using that little space. But otherwise, as far as I've seen it, it's been working okay. You know, it's been about the same as the speed hump. And then if you have a larger vehicle that can straddle that, then you know it's something that it's not supposed to affect you. So.
Well, they have them in Castle Rock, Colorado, and I talked to somebody there that put them in place. He's the traffic person there, and he said they work great. The residents love them. And because there's a break in the middle, my only wonder is, you know, we get all these bikers coming flying down our hill because it's a downhill right in front of my cabin, and I'm worried that the bikers are going to try and take that middle lane, or that middle break as well.
Only do it once.
Yeah, but anyway, the idea, he said they seem to be very effective there.
And yeah, just to add on to that a little bit, for emergency services, when we get their input, that's generally a concern that they have with speed humps, is that, you know, they don't have, or that it forces them to slow down, slows down their response time. Speed cushions kind of mitigate that in a way.
So who's for it?
So yeah, that's, I don't think I really saw who, it would be for a speed cushion.
I am.
Is this in place of, or in addition to, or any one of the three above we'll go with, or?
Yeah, so I would probably say in place of, say, a speed table or speed hump.
Do one or the other.
Right.
Josh, I might be just speaking for myself, but I'm grouping all the three of those together as a solution, right? And it's gonna come down to what you said, the emergency responders vocalize, what the road crews vocalize. Honestly, if you're living out in Eldorado, I could care less which of the three of them.
Me too.
Some kind of
Right,
speed
the average person's
leveling
still gonna,
device, it's all the same.
experience it.
Yeah. You know what works better.
Yeah, I have no idea.
That's fair enough, so.
You launch them out by.
So as long as we're okay with either tables, humps, or cushions, then I think that's, we'll just figure out which one works best in this context. Okay.
Those don't work.
We don't have enough space. Yeah, there's generally not a whole lot of space, but,
First, just drive right over.
But just for the sake of actually making this semi-official, can I get a set of hands? I see none.
I'd be for it if it were like at the beginning of town, like, cause our sign that says "Welcome to Eldora," people just fly by that.
Well, that's a good one.
I've clocked people going 51 there, and so I think that if we had something to introduce the town that's more in the middle, then they'll see it and experience it versus not even seeing the sign because it's a blur.
And it could be a place where people get turned around too, like if the parking, how, what we were talking about, if the parking's full. Yeah, put
And
a
it-
sign there, or a person.
Shouldn't that though be lumped in with the others because it's kind of an effective speed bump? And we were thinking of the speed bump, you're gonna have to do it at
Right, so
Marysville.
we would
So
be
this would
shifting
probably be a
traffic
choice.
before it
Right.
gets anywhere near there.
Okay.
So the way that it kind of slows down traffic is it forces you out of your normal path. And again, it has that element of you can build it to have that gateway feeling. But yeah, that's about the extent of this.
Question, I apologize for the run up here. I spent part of my time in northern Michigan and they have the same problem with snow removal and everything that we have here. Do you have access and have you used the Mylar medians, which have a curb in gray and brick through here, but they're flat, perfectly flat Mylar. I've witnessed people coming on them. They get heat bonded to the pavement. It's plastic like you get a vehicle ramp, and it's shaped like the median. It's this wide and however long. It gets heat bonded down to the pavement. People come upon it and they think it's gonna ruin their car, but it's still flat.
Yeah, they have fake taverns.
Yeah, well, yeah, potholes,
Yeah.
flowers, people.
Yeah.
They're
Optical illusion.
Right, optical illusions, because that would, I don't know if you've
I
ever
haven't
used them or.
personally seen that.
I can send you some photos, I've got some.
Yeah, if you have.
Okay.
There
Just
you
a,
go.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a thought, because I'm not sure this would, with the change in the lanes and shifting and all of the work involved, something that didn't require it, it doesn't impede traffic, but psychologically makes people think, crap, I'm gonna hit something, I better slow down and move around.
But I like the gateway feeling.
That's actually, Josh, you mentioned that when we first started meeting with you. You said, I think it could have a better effect if there was some kind of, you're entering a residential area kind of feel, right, as you come in.
Right.
So I'm just kind of reiterating what you mentioned early on.
Okay, so do we need to revote then, now that we've discussed it?
Do you want us?
Have we changed our parameters here? Like, do you want Mian as, or to consider, as a gateway to Eldora, essentially?
Raise
Yes.
the west end to that,
Yes.
to reintroduce.
Yes, we need one at Laura's end too.
Lance is talking about an optical illusion.
So I was just asking if there's an option, if they've used that before, not necessarily to replace this one, right?
Right, so in general, the lateral shift here is what we're really voting on, because we could do it raised or not raised. You could still have, maybe a sign there in the middle.
Yeah, the gateway's a nice idea. I don't know if it matters whether you have it raised or not, because if it's something like that, cars are just gonna go around it.
Right, so what we would be voting on basically is creating space in the middle.
A perception.
Yeah, in that space in the middle, if there's something there in the middle of the road.
So for perception.
So for
Perception. The visual.
I like the idea of like entrance to our town.
Okay, so I would go yes on the entrance to the town.
Okay, yeah, as an entrance to the town.
Mhm.
Yeah, it looks like there's a majority
And a big arrow pointing up the mountain to ski
there. Put it up the ski road, yeah. That way.
One of those watching arrows.
The raised intersection.
This one is a raised intersection.
You said that was expensive, so it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. It's technically feasible, but it's, you know, was probably the most expensive here.
Yeah, more expensive than the circle.
There's already, you're talking about six in Eldorado.
Yeah, 6 at Eldora is probably.
There, so what would they?
Right, so
And it's not
the
gonna state
idea
the
probably
character of
being
the
that it
whole
would
town,
help
which is
with
what you
the
would-
perception of we need to come to a stop here, not blow the stop sign or whatever.
Okay, no.
Just took no speed for the rest of us.
I'm hearing lots of no's so far. Okay.
Secretary, do you write that down?
That's
out of the question.
So yeah, again, this is one of those, okay,
I don't think that's.
shifting the road.
No, kids won't, and dogs aren't gonna be engaged.
Living on probably one of the larger, other than the entrance to town, the larger speedway areas of Eldora, in front of, from 8th to 10th or beyond. This is appealing, but when it comes down to property and having to deal with people giving up and all of that stuff,
Exactly.
I wouldn't vote for it, but I like the idea from a conceptual, eliminate this long frickin' drag strip that we have there. This is nice, but when it comes to property and all that.
Hey Josh, I didn't get, what was the vote on the raised intersection?
A nay.
So it was a nay on the race intersection, is that right?
Yes.
Spend money in other ways.
Nay on this. Nay on
I'm hearing this nay on this one.
Nay.
Okay. Then that's it. Those are all the ones then.
I have a question. Could some of those things be used on Klondike, like the stop signs in the middle of the road, or dirt speed bumps?
Dirt speed bumps.
Otherwise known as don't grade the road.
Well, that's,
I mean, that's
Don't grade the road.
oh, yeah.
So as far as like physical measures, generally, like if you try to build a speed bump out of the gravel, it would just break down.
Same thing with 4th and 3rd.
How about speed signs in the middle of the road, in the center?
If there's enough room, that could be an option. Yeah, it's kind of it's not something I've seen a lot of folks do, but it's, you know, it's as the same as, you know, the paved section. You can still put something in the middle as long as you have that space to get past on either side. Looks like you have a question?
On the speed limit signs, could you get the little red and blue lights that go at the top?
You
They have it
mean
in
the ones that
Louisville.
flash back at you?
Yeah, they're just, when you're over the speed limit, not only do you get the numbers, but you get a little red and blue light at the top.
Yeah, so that's for sure.
Yeah, it looks like a
one that I
squad
have
car.
there. That's that model that actually has that feature. So yeah, we're actually purchasing a couple more for North 75th Street there around the Hygiene Elementary there. But yeah, that is a feature.
Okay, just thank you so much, Josh. Thanks for your patience.
And thank you, Catherine, land use.
Can I make
You're welcome.
Sort of an
I'm just
unrelated-
carrying the ball. You guys have done a
unrelated but
lot of work
unrelated
before me.
comment is for the last, this is the second winter in a row they've been plowing all the way up to Hesse,
Yes.
which has greatly reduced the impact on the west end of town with parking and human waste and dog waste, etc. The impact we have now is people are getting up to Hesse and driving down the river road and getting stuck because the road up 4th of July is blocked closed. But they see, oh, look, here's the road. Can we close off the river road in the winter?
Here's, that Toyota that was down there,
Well, there's been several, the last 2 weekends we've had incidents.
that cost him about $1,800.
Good.
I believe
You know, they spent an hour
That's how you
in my
learn.
house waiting for help. So I'm impacted. They claim the emergency phone doesn't work. So I tested it the other day, it does work. Matt said he tested it the other day and it did not work. So it's not consistent.
After you tested it, I checked it the next day. And didn't. Because we
But
got a
there's-
911 call, and you
And
called
that- and it
said,
was me.
oh, it does work.
Yes, it was me that day. But still, that's not stopping people from driving down the river road
So
and
are you
getting stuck.
suggesting not plowing?
No, I'm suggesting close
Just-
the river road.
Permanently.
Where the facilities are at Hussey,
There's no facilities there.
Take a vote on it.
the outhouses.
There's no
Take a
outhouse.
vote on it.
Can we vote on that?
Okay, I'm not clear where it is.
Can I make out just a final
Where you have
pitch
Hesse
for,
They're
That's-
driving down
yeah,
into the
that's where
river.
I-
There's no outhouse there in the wintertime.
Oh, there isn't? Okay. I haven't been up there.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Why didn't I ask you first?
I agree with you.
Thanks, Josh.
As Earl would say, he's been fighting traffic problems and speed problems ever since there were cars in the road.